Mike, thank you for hopping on. I feel like we have important work to do, is to kind of open people's eyes to what they're watching in Victor Wembanyama, and we're going to get there and understand exactly what's happening on our screens from a life form on a basketball court that seems to be from another planet or from another time, and it feels like we're not talking about it enough or fully appreciate what's happening.
To be clear, the time he's from is the future. It's not the past.
Yes.
He's been sent from the future to revolutionize the game of basketball.
I like that, like imagining him being a caveman, like he's just a Neanderthal, like playing in today's, like, oh, like that has never been one description of Victor Wembanyama. Yes, he is from the future. I want to start here though. I don't know if you got a chance to watch the Pablo Torre Finds Out story that I did on this whistleblower / stats scammer / Philly executive who we talked to, and to talk about like expansion teams in the 90s or the late 90s at the zenith of Chicago Bulls, Michael Jordan. They were trying to basically cook the books. The home team stat keepers were trying to cook the books to draw interest in their team, draw interest league-wide, market their team through juiced stats. And it was the story about a stat, manipulator, but really it's a much larger story about like, how do we verify the past? Like we think of analytics or sabermetrics or baseball stats as like ironclad sacred data. Like you can go to Baseball Reference and feel pretty good about what you're seeing about Ted Williams or Babe Ruth or what have you. But then when you find out that those numbers are subjective and maybe fudged, and we have no real way to fact check this, I wanted to know what you thought of that.
Yeah, it's a great story. I encourage everyone to listen to it. And it's what the feeling it leaves you with is just frustration, because you're a numbers guy. I'm a numbers guy. What you want to believe is that there is a objective way to compare and contrast players of different eras. There are advanced stats like win shares and stats per 36 minutes, per 48 minutes, whatever. And yeah, the eras are different. The 80s was more, the early 90s was more defensive, and this era is obviously much more offensive, and the three-point shot changed everything, and Larry Bird never hit more than 100 threes in a season, and now literally every Wembanyama has 82 so far this year, and he's 7'4". So there's differences across eras, but you want to believe that the numbers matter. And the truth is that, the story that you did with Pablo about Alex Rucker and the blocks at home versus blocks on the road seems egregious in some ways. But from my travels in baseball statistics, with baseball being my first love, it's not that different. There was a stat that hit I think Twitter yesterday that a bunch of people sent me about Derek Jeter. And it was like Derek Jeter had fewer errors in his career than whoever, Cal Ripken and Honus Wagner and all these people. And it's like, well, errors are among the most subjective scoring calls in the sport. And if you are the home scorekeeper for the New York Yankees and it's 1998, are you giving Derek Jeter an error on a marginal play? Of course you're not. Like,
there goes your job.
Yeah, exactly. And I remember there were times when David Ortiz, I'm a Red Sox fan, and David Ortiz would hit a ball like a rifle shot up the middle, and the second baseman would go to backhand it and it would clank out of his glove, and the scorekeeper would give him an error, and he would actively lobby in the media for the score to be changed. And so guess what happened the next time he hit one of those up the middle? So the truth is, you can never eliminate the human element from any of these games, because there are, in the margins, there are things that are inarguable. A made three-pointer is inarguable. A home run is inarguable. But in the middle, in both sports and all sports, there's just a lot of gray. And, it's hardly surprising, although it was revelatory, the degree to which it was kosher. That was the thing that really kind of surprised me in your story. It wasn't just like, yeah, you've got some leeway here, and if you're a home team fan, you're allowed to kind of, give an assist when one is not warranted. the thing that's surprising is the degree to which he was encouraged. That was the real revelation for me.
Yeah. And for him, I was kind of blown away that even gassing up Nick Van Exel, the opposing star for the Lakers, was a good thing because he did it on the Vancouver Grizzlies floor.
That's right.
How do we get people to?
Yeah.
Like they would actively sabotage their own team's efforts, or at least, hey, the guy got 23 assists against us. And what he described to us was he got a pat on the back after that. We're getting on SportsCenter tomorrow. Great job giving Nick Van Exel 23 assists. All these people are going to see Vancouver on their TVs now. And we forget about this, right, Mike? Like growing up, SportsCenter was how you marketed your teams. Like that is your national audience. That is your Twitter. That is your TikTok. That is the social media, the marketing funnel for everything in the 90s. And
that's the only way you saw other teams. There was no league pass. There was no extra innings package. You learned the scores of the games by watching the 11 p.m. SportsCenter and seeing the highlights. And we all stayed up. We all watched it. We all learned that the Grizzlies had beaten the Hawks by 10 at home because it was on the West Coast. And you were either going to watch it or you were going to wake up the next day and read the newspaper. I mean, we are old, man. Let's face it. We're old people, and this is the way that we used to get our information. And I think even today, the truth is even today, and this was sort of what you and Pablo got into at the very end, even today, when you've got a player like Nikola Jokic, who is doing things on the basketball court that no one has ever done before, every single night, I'm going to basketball reference to type in his stats to see if anyone has ever had the game that he just had randomly in February against the Orlando Magic or whatever. And, he's got 26, 9, and 14 in the fourth quarter. And there's a marginal loose ball that is kind of knocked around by Porter and then picked up by Jokic. Who do you think is getting that rebound? It's always going to be the star player, the guy who has something on the line. We've literally seen NBA players, one rebound short of a triple-double, throw a ball off their own backboard to themselves in order to try to
Ricky
get that.
Davis.
Yes, they are trying to. These things do matter. They matter to the players. They matter to the contracts that they eventually sign and negotiate. So I don't know. Even in an era where every movement, every step is being tracked by 100 cameras, I still think that you're looking at some variance in the way these things are calculated.
So you, as the showrunner and writer behind The Good Place and The Office and your book right over here that I have, How to Be Perfect, and Parks and Rec, Brooklyn Nine-Nine, go on down the road. In Hollywood, Mike, does this ever pop up? Is the fact that we can't go back in history and either verify claims or watch the tape? Because that is a huge problem in this. Is we don't even know if Wilt Chamberlain scored 100 points. We don't know.
Yeah, everyone says he did. He held up a piece of paper. I mean, that seems like as much evidence as we have. Yes, there are two. I want to tell you two things about the history of Hollywood that resonated when I heard the story. Now, the first is that very famously, there are no recordings of The Tonight Show with Johnny Carson for the first 15 years that he did The Tonight Show, for the simple reason that back then in the early 60s and then into the 70s, tapes were expensive. And they didn't think anyone would ever care. This was tissue paper, right? Your actual tissue. You use it and then you throw it away and you get a new one. And so every night NBC would just record over the tape. So they would do the show, Johnny Carson Tonight Show.
NBC would record over the tape?
Yes. And I believe the affiliates, I don't know how the system worked exactly back then, but no one thought at all about the idea that someday someone might want to see this again. So there are no recordings of The Tonight Show for a decade or more than when Johnny Carson was hosting it, the most famous host of The Tonight Show in history. And no one had a VCR and no one was recording it at home. And so they just don't exist. And it's one of the great kind of lost, archival holes in Hollywood history, is that the most famous show hosted by the most famous host is gone forever and we'll never see what it was like. You don't start getting Johnny Carson Tonight Shows until the 70s at some point.
What does that do to the lore? What does that do to the lore of Johnny? Or
yeah, I mean, it's like, everyone says, oh, Carson was and is still the kind of the host, right? All of the people who have come after him, all of the Conans and the Jimmy Fallons and the Seth Meyerses and Jimmy Kimmels, they all still at some level are compared to Carson, or they're in Carson's shadow. And we don't really know if that's warranted to some degree, right? It's like he was the most famous guy, but he was also the only guy. There weren't 100 networks and Comedy Central and everything else where there were a bunch of late night shows. It was just Carson. Carson ruled over the landscape of television, and certainly of late night, and still kind of does to this day. And we'll never really understand why, because we don't have a good, 38% of all of the shows or 50% of the shows he ever did. The second thing is, I'll make this brief, but this is one of my favorite stories. My late father-in-law, Regis Philbin, told me this story, and it really tells you like what we lost with because of the way that like the technology evolved, and it's very similar to the basketball story you did. So Regis was hosting a local show in San Diego in the early 60s. It was, I believe, called Saturday Night Live. And it was just him in this San Diego studio for 3 hours on Saturday night. And it was like a little variety show. It's a tiny studio. There would be a little 3-piece band. He would sing some songs. He would interview people, whatever. And they put no thought into it. They would have, he and his producer, this guy, Tom Batista, who was a longtime family friend, they would have one meeting about it on Thursday and go like, yeah, we'll have this guy and we'll have this guy and we'll sing a song. We'll be done. And the affiliate owner came to Tom and said, you guys have to be out of the studio. You've got to turn everything off by, I think, midnight. Because if it goes 1 minute over midnight, we got to pay all the crew double time. And if it goes past one, we got to pay triple time, whatever. No problem. They're doing the show that Saturday. It's 11:08 p.m. Tom gets a call. Jerry Lewis wants to come on the show. Now, remember, this is a local, Jerry Lewis is the biggest star in America. This is a local TV show in San Diego. And he goes, what are you talking about? He's like, yeah, he just pulled his boat into to port and he wants to come on the show. And Tom goes, great, get him over here. So at like 11:38, Jerry Lewis shows up and he walks on into the middle of this live show. Yeah. And Regis goes, Jerry Lewis, what are you doing here? And Jerry says, and they knew each other from the Joey Bishop era, from that whole thing. So he goes, Jerry, what are you doing here? And Jerry Lewis says, well, I'm here to make a citizen's arrest. And Regis says, what are you talking about? And he goes, I'm arresting you for making the worst television show I've ever seen in my life. And it turned out, so he had pulled his boat into dock and he had a TV on the boat because Jerry Lewis was rich and he had a TV on his boat with an antenna. He started watching the show. He was laughing about how slapdash it was, and he rolled into the studio. So they talk and they laugh, and he says, you want to sing a song? And Jerry Lewis says, sure. And they start singing old standards and classic songs, and they're singing, and they just go, they blow past midnight, they blow past 1 a.m., they blow past 2 a.m., and the crew is being paid quadruple time. But the affiliate owner is like, you know what? It's Jerry Lewis. It's fine. Well, this is a big deal.
Yeah.
And so they get to the end, finally, 2:30 in the morning, they sign off. And I said to Tom, when he told me this story, he sadly passed away a couple years ago. I said, please tell me you have a tape of this. And he goes, no, of course we didn't. The next night we taped over the show because it was just like, who's going to want to see this again? So imagine now for a second how many things like that happen in the history of television back in the 50s, 60s, even the 70s, that are just lost forever and that no one will ever see again. It's really sad.
Is there any recreation we can do? Like, I'm trying to think, like, I don't know. Like, does someone, I don't know if it's claymation or if it's a cartoon rendering. I don't even know, but like, is it really lost to history? Like the idea of like Wilt Chamberlain, there's like little patchy, versions, like little clips of the game that we're trying to kind of piece together in a very like paper mache way. But like for the Tonight Show, all we have is just oral histories of the Tonight Show. Is like, this happened and this is a book that someone wrote, and that's all we have. There's no this is
and most of the
scripture of Tonight Show.
Most of the people who worked on those shows are dead and gone. And we have some oral reports and we have some firsthand accounts or whatever. I'll tell you the best analogy really is the Negro Leagues in baseball. Because in the Negro Leagues, we have cobbled together some statistics about some things that Josh Gibson did or that Satchel Paige did or whatever. But the Negro Leagues weren't even covered by the white media. So what we have is incredibly piecemeal and probably gives you about 5% of the information of what really happened. Not to mention the fact that the Negro Leagues as a concept is really a sort of pastiche. It's a hodgepodge. There were dozens and dozens of leagues all over the place in the Midwest, in the Southeast, in the Mid-Atlantic region, in the Northeast, all over the place. And there were teams would shift and change all the time. They would put together traveling teams and all-star teams, and they would have, different collections of groups of these guys going and playing all over the country. And you were lucky if there was any report about anything that happened in any legacy newspaper. More often it was only black reporters covering the games for a black audience. And that, to me, as a baseball fan, is devastating because we have anecdotes and myths and legends about Josh Gibson hitting a home run that never came down, or Josh Gibson hitting the home run that hit the back wall at Yankee Stadium, which would have made it like a 585-foot home run. We have these stories that people tell, but that's really all we have. We don't have, and I want those numbers, man. If there's any numbers I want numbers from the Negro Leagues because I think that it would be truly amazing to see how good those guys were.
So do you feel like you're cataloging Victor Wembanyama here like a journalist? Like, hey, people need to know what we're watching here. And I'm going to read you some of these texts that if I can, that I'll get at like 2 a.m. I'm on the East Coast and I'll just wake up in the morning and I've got a text from Mike Schur saying 15-8 with 5 blocks in 21 minutes so far.
Yeah.
That's it. That's just the text. He almost has more blocks than the Heat. Wemby has 18, 7, 3, and 4 steals in 10 minutes.
That was amazing, that game.
Why are you doing this? Like, what is it about Victor Wembanyama?
Yeah. This is the ostensible purpose of our conversation here today. I, as a numbers guy, I obsess over individuals who do things that I've never seen before. So in baseball, I was obsessed with Barry Bonds during his great inflated era. I was obsessed with Pedro in 99 and 2000, partly because he played for my team, but also partly because there was a year where his ERA was 3 full runs lower than league average. 3 runs lower than league average.
And what captivated me and everybody and Red Sox Nation, of course, about Pedro was he was tiny, right?
Yeah. He was 5'7"
There's a league of giants of these guys who are juiced beyond belief, and he's tiny, and he's making them look like children out there.
Toying with them. Absolutely toying with them. I mean, he would have, I remember a game in May one year where he threw a 2-hitter and struck out like 15 through a complete game. And it was like, you just expected that every time out. Like I missed that game and I went to look at the box score and it was like 9 innings, 2 hits, 1 run, 15 strikeouts, no walks, and it was like
walked on water 6 times. And you're like, yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah. Levitated 8 feet above the mound and a ray of pure light entered his soul and he dominated the Blue Jays or whatever. And so I love it when there are guys in any sport who seemingly every night do something that even though you and I have watched 10,000 basketball games and 50,000 baseball games in my case, you were like, oh, I've never seen that before. And Victor Wembanyama, as a 19-year-old, has begun a career of what I expect to be, knock on wood, 20 or so years of doing something nearly every night that we've never seen before. So I did not come unprepared. I can't come on a Tom Haberstroh podcast without some stats. So let me just lay some of this stuff out for you of what we've seen so far in his first, call it 50 games. Okay. Going into last night, he had 171 blocks and the Miami Heat had 187 as a team. Now, the Miami Heat are a very good defensive team. They're, in fact, I think currently the best defensive team in the East, but in terms of their scoring average. And he has essentially the same number of block shots as that entire team. As of a couple days ago, Wemby had more blocks in February than 6 other entire teams had in February. The Heat, Kings, Bulls, Knicks, Clippers, and your Portland Trail Blazers.
Insane. Yep.
Akeem Olajuwon had 220 blocks his rookie year. Now, keep in mind, he was 22 and had played 4 years in college. Also, keep in mind, no one took three-pointers. No one. So nowadays, half of the shots, roughly, let's say, are three-pointers, which are obviously much more difficult to block. No one took threes.
Though.
Yeah,
sure.
he does still do it. But Akeem had 220 blocks this year. Wemby's going to sail past him. He's already top 20 all time for blocks as a rookie, and he's only played 50 games. The only rookie ahead of him, whose rookie year was this century, is Walker Kessler from last year.
Yeah,
Wemby, I believe, passed him last night at the pace he's on, which is 3.3 or 3.4, depending on what day you're looking at. If he plays the rest of his team's games, he'll get about 76 more blocks, which will easily make him 6th all time for rookies, behind only Hakeem Olajuwon, the Admiral, Shaq, Mark Eaton, and Alonzo Mourning. The most recent of those seasons was 31 years ago. And also remember, nobody took threes back then. And here's the craziest part of all of this. He plays 28 minutes a game. He is playing 28.5 minutes a game. Pop is letting him go a little longer. He played 31 the other night. I think they're going to try to stretch him out now. But in order to avoid injury and because the team's going nowhere, they have limited him to 28 minutes a game. He is still going to have the 6th best all-time rookie year for blocks and the best since 31 years ago. And everyone is taking half their shots as threes now. That alone, just saying that is like, well, this is an alien. This person is new and different and interesting. But, I'll give you this last stat and then I'll stop and we can open the discussion.
Don't stop. This is this is as close to sports. I won't get too graphic, but yes, the pants are getting tighter as you're going here because I just feel like this is excellent. Yes, keep going.
Okay, the blocks you expect. Right, he's 20 feet tall. So everyone knew that when he came into the league, he was going to block shots. But his overall season, right now, as we sit here are his numbers in the main stats that matter: 20.7 points a game, 10.1 rebounds, 3.4 blocks, 1.3 steals, and he is hitting 1.6 threes per game. He's only shooting 32%. But he's hitting more than a 3.5 per game. Do you know who else, Tom, has had that season ever in NBA history?
Jokic.
No one. No one has ever had that season in NBA history. 20.7, 10.1, 3.4 blocks, 1.3 steals, 1.6 threes per game. No one has had that season. He is 19 years old, and this is his first season. And so as a stats guy, as a numbers guy, I think it's important that everyone understand he had so much hype coming into the league. Everyone was so interested in him. There were the viral videos of him stepping over rows of seats to like greet people in France after games that made him look like like an alien. And there's been all this hype and all this pressure. And I think it's important to understand. And I know that those stats can seem cherry picked. I get it. But the point is, no one has ever had the year he is currently having, and it's his first year, and he's 19.
Maze chiming in the chat, and more importantly, more blocks on the road. Yes, thank you. Bring it full circle. Hey, now I'm thinking maybe the Spurs are suppressing his stats because they want to keep all the people from.
Pop wants to keep him humble.
No. Yeah. We need to limit his minutes here. Like, let's also recognize that the Jeremy Sochan experiment wildly failed in the sense that, like, yes, we can try out Jeremy Sochan, a 20-year-old power forward wing who's going to be our point guard. We're going to try to see if he's got some point guard skills to him. It failed spectacularly in the point that it neutered Victor Wembanyama in such a way that I think is even all the stats you're describing here. It even understates how good this guy has been this year because he's dealing with a lot of the time no one who can get him the ball. Okay.
Yes.
Here's a stat for you. This season, according to Second Spectrum data, when Trae Jones is passing him the ball, the only real point guard on the roster, Trae Jones, when he is passing Victor Wembanyama the ball, Victor Wembanyama is shooting a 57% effective field goal percentage. So that's 57%. Once we account for the added value of the 3-point shot, he's shooting 57% from the floor. When Jeremy Sochan is passing Victor Wembanyama the ball, it is not 57%, Mike. It is 43%. 43%. A 7 foot, and I'm going to say here, it's one of my soapboxes here with Victor Wembanyama. There's no way he's 7'4". He is 7'5". He is 7'5".
And
okay?
maybe still growing.
And maybe still growing. Okay. I don't know why the marketing of this guy isn't just he's 7'5", because that I feel like is sexier and more grabby than 7'4". He's 7'5". Okay. Every player knows that when after the games, they've never seen anything like this guy. Okay. So we're getting LeBron James. We're getting everybody who
Giannis after the game was like, I stood next to him. He's way taller than me.
Everyone who's playing with this guy is blown away. And these are guys who are so competitive and so programmed to believe that they are the best player in the league. And they're all saying the same thing. There's a chorus, a consensus that this guy is beyond their form. Beyond. They don't know what to do with this guy. Okay.
This is a really key point, though. I want to stay on this for a second because my beloved Boston Celtics have a tendency to get three happy, which is not necessarily a bad thing when you've got the 5 starters that they have, all of whom are very good 3-point shooters. But sometimes the threes don't fall and they get into trouble and they get they have to make adjustments. They now, because of Brad Stevens' offseason moves, they have a new weapon, and that weapon is named Kristaps Porzingis, and that weapon is 7'3". And they have started to do a thing in their games, which is when they need to just score some points in the paint, off of a miss, if the ball goes, especially if it's a 3, off of a miss, Porzingis, who's very fast and also 7'3", will sprint up the court. And the rebound will come to, let's say, Derek White or Drew Holiday. And the first guy back, very often for the other team, is a guard.
Mouse in the
Porzingis will just run to the basket, and White or Holiday will throw an entry pass from roughly half court to just in the playground way of like when you had the tallest kid on your team, you would just throw it really high and the tallest kid would grab it. And Porzingis grabs the ball up above his head and he just turns around and drops it in the basket. And they have started doing this much more frequently in the last, I would say, dozen or 15 games. And it is an unstoppable offensive weapon. Wemby is 2 inches taller than he is and is also very fast. And by the way, can also dribble. He had a play the other day. Sorry, now this is digression central. He had a play, I think last night, where he brought the ball up the court at the top of the key, went behind his back to get around a defender who was backing up, was roughly at the free throw line after he had taken his second step, threw the ball off the backboard to himself, caught it, and was going to dunk it, except that he was fouled and he didn't hit the shot. It is incomprehensible to calculate the future of a 7'5" guy who can do that. I sent you, I think, a screen grab a while ago of Wemby with the ball about 37 or 38 feet from the basket. Yeah. And what it said was, after he caught this ball, he did not dribble and also dunked. And it was like, that's why this guy is so fun to watch, because the physics of what he is capable of are essentially unlimited. And when they get a point guard, imagine for a second that running the point for the Spurs is Tyrese Halliburton, or even Chris Paul in his weakened state, or anyone who just has a true geometric understanding of the game. his effective field goal percentage would be 400. He would be shooting 400% from the field.
So I want to also talk about, like, yes, when we talk about Trae Jones, he's like he's a replacement level point guard. Like, he is like a good point guard that will set you up, and he is a pass first point guard. But he's not Luka. He's not drawing double teams every time he touches the ball. He's not Trae Young. Right. He's not Chris Paul. Like Tyrese Halliburton, like you said, if he played with anyone of a supporting cast that was remotely close to the Celtics, remotely close to the Warriors, if he had a Draymond Green or a Steph Curry, one guy.
Imagine how Draymond would use him. Oh God.
The game would be over. And so it brings me to this point, like, Mike, when Victor Wembanyama is on the floor with Trae Jones and Devin Vassell, and he does not have Sochan and that experiment, I wrote about this with LeBron James. Norris Cole was so bad. And I'm sorry, Norris, if you're watching. He has his own pod and he's doing well in the G League. Like, I love that guy. I wrote this story because when Chris Bosh and Dwayne Wade and LeBron James were big three, peak of their powers, they were killing people. They were like 20 plus 25 net rating every time they're on the floor, no matter who was on the floor, except when Norris Cole, the rookie, was on the floor. And they couldn't beat anybody. And I wrote, and this was before like social media took off, so it was a little nastier than I should have been, but I was like, Norris Cole is big three kryptonite.
Yeah.
Like the only way you stop the big three, LeBron James, Dwayne Wade, at the apex of their powers, is if Eric Spoelstra plays Norris Cole. Just diffuses everything that they do. That's how I feel about Sochan. When you look at the numbers of Victor Wembanyama just with Sochan and without, or when you have Trae and Vassell and Victor Wembanyama on the floor with no Sochan this year, okay? Here's a stat for you. They've played 151 minutes, Mike. Okay. Which in of itself is kind of an indictment on Pop. That
it's wild. Yeah.
These three guys who are competent NBA players have only played 151 minutes together on the floor without Sochan. They are in 151 minutes plus 80 as a team. Plus
oh my
80.
God.
This team is 11-48. Okay. They're 11-48. But when you have three competent players on the floor, they are plus 80 in 151 minutes. And that net rating is 25, plus 25. The San Antonio Spurs, when they are playing Trae Jones, Devin Vassell, Victor Wembanyama on the floor without Sochan, they are killing people.
That's wild.
When they play with Sochan without Devin Vassell and without Trae Jones and Victor Wembanyama, okay, so Victor Wembanyama still on the floor.
Right.
They got Sochan and not the other two competent players. In 201 minutes, they're outscored by 88 points. Their net rating is minus 21. They go from plus 25 to minus 21 with the supporting cast around Wemby. That, to me, is egregious. And it might be the single most important thing when we talk about how good Victor Wembanyama is and why he hasn't captured America's hearts yet. Is because of the supporting cast around him. If you put him on the Celtics, if you put him on the Golden State Warriors, if you put him on the Pelicans, hell, I don't know. Yeah. Give me like a 40-45 win team out there.
Put him on the Hawks. Put him on the Hawks and have Trae Young running around and drawing double teams out at the perimeter, and also a very good passer. Like put Wemby on the Hawks. What is he doing? What is he doing to the league if he's on the Hawks and he's got a guy who can draw double teams out at the perimeter? I got more for you. Here's more. Wemby had a triple-double. He had the triple-double with blocks against the Raptors, right? That was amazing. Yeah. He had the 5x5 game against the Lakers. It was 27, 10, 8, 5, and 5.
At Staples Center. This was not home cooking again.
In Los Angeles. He's only the 15th guy ever to have a 5x5 game in the history of the league. Again, he's 19 years old. But here's the crazy thing that no one remembers. The night before in Sacramento, he missed a 5x5 game by one assist. So he nearly had back-to-back 5x5 games. NBA.com had a stat. He is the third fastest player to 1,000 points, 500 rebounds, and 150 blocks. He's only behind Shaquille O'Neal, who did it in 43 games, David Robinson, who did it in 47 games. Wemby did it in 50. Again, he is 19 years old, and also he's playing 28 minutes a game. That stat to me is now you're like, okay, you can say,
so that's that David Robinson and Shaq stat. Is that a rookie stat or is that just in general?
It's fastest to 1,000 points, 500 games, 500 rebounds, and 150 blocks.
Okay, so it's obviously, Shaq's rookie season, he averaged 38 minutes per game.
Yeah, right. So he's playing another third as much, essentially, as Wemby is. So you if you think the other stats are cherry picked about, the season that he's having, 20.7, 10.1, 3.4, 1.3, 1.6 a game, that's fair. That's a legitimate criticism. You know what isn't a cherry pick stat is how many points do you have, how many rebounds do you have, and how many blocks do you have? And he's third all-time fastest to those numbers.
So I wrote before the season, Mike. I don't know if you saw this as a subscriber to the Finder. You might have seen this come into your email inbox, and thank you for subscribing, Mike.
My pleasure.
I said Victor Wembanyama is going to win the MVP.
You did.
I said if people are picking him for DPOY, grow a set and go and pick him for MVP. Because this guy is really good offensively. If he's going to average 20 points a game and be considered the DPOY, then that's the most valuable player in the NBA. And that was my point, was every time we have a Giannis or a Hakeem who are a DPOY and MVP, you got to average 20 points. You have to be a go-to scorer on your team. And that is Wemby. The only thing that's holding him back from the MVP conversation is the supporting cast, which brings me to my next point, Mike. What are we doing? If the reason why he's not considered the best player or the most valuable player in the league, and we're saying if you put that dude on the Warriors or anywhere else in the league, no one's going to stop you. That to me means you're the best player in the league or you're up there for the running for MVP. And yet they're 11 and 48. And that's why he's not being talked about in this conversation, is because of the supporting cast. And that has nothing to do with Victor Wembanyama. Okay.
Devil's advocate, because in many ways I agree with you. Devil's advocate would say this. The supporting cast certainly hurting him. However, there are significant flaws in his game that come from being a rookie, from being 19, from not having played against NBA competition, right? Chief among them is his turnovers. He's turning the ball over at an alarming rate. And every night when I go to look at his stats for my nightly endorphin rush, I do always see, he had 23, 14, 6, 5 blocks, and 7 turnovers. Like, it's every night. He's got a large number of turnovers. Now, granted, he's 100 feet tall and the ball is being poured into him at different spots on the floor. And there's a lot of very strong, very quick, very adept defenders who can strip the ball from him, who can step into a passing lane, whatever. The other devil's advocate would be to say this. There are these crazy numbers that we've gone through of he's having a season no one's ever had before, and he's only 19, and it's wild. My question for you is this, and this seems like an insane thing to say when you've just argued that could be the MVP. Is he even the rookie of the year? Because not far from where he plays, there's another young man who is shooting 40% from three, who is averaging 17, 8, and 3 with 2.6 blocks a game, which is a significant amount lower than 3.4, but it's still crazy to average 2.6 blocks a game as a rookie, and is only averaging 1.7 turnovers. And I think you could make an argument that despite the fact that Wemby is a never before seen alien who has beamed to Earth from outer space in the future to change the game of basketball, that Chet is actually having a better rookie year.
I love this point. And I think in the way of like, the only way to pump up one guy is to take the other guy down. I want to say Chet Holmgren is awesome. And if if the point is, well, we don't even know if he's the best rookie in the league, how could he be in the MVP conversation? I would say Chet Holmgren should be in that conversation.
I would agree.
We're going to say, how good is Wemby? Well, he's not as good as, or he's maybe better than Chet Holmgren. Well, Chet Holmgren's awesome. Like when I think he's the first player ever to have, or rookie ever to have 100 blocks and 100 threes in a season. Or some stat that Royce Young tweeted out that I was like, oh my God, like that's incredible.
Wemby will be the second by the time the year is over.
Yeah, there's a lot of that where you're like, how this has never happened, and then you find out like Walker Kessler did it last year, like you said. There was one time where there was a 15x5 or 5x5 stat that came across my Twitter that was like he's the only player to do this since Jamal Tinsley in 2004. I'm like, probably want to leave that name out of it. You know, like he's the last player to do this stat line since Royal Ivy in 2001. You're like, okay. Took a lot of steam out of that stat.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I hear what you're saying. And I wonder, Mike, if you put Wemby next to Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, how many of those turnovers just vanished, right? Like the idea of like part of the reason why the supporting cast matters in the Wemby conversation is because basketball is a team sport, right? But also he's trying to create stuff out of nowhere, out of nothing. He's making lemonade out of lemons when he's trying to build something out of this offense that there's just not that many guys on the Spurs offense or just in general that are competent, right? That if you had Shai Gilgeous-Alexander to be the foundation of your offense and the hub of your offense, how much easier your life is for Wemby. Yeah. So Chet Holmgren, I love watching the Thunder. I love watching that team play, and Chet Holmgren is the real deal. Like Chet Holmgren's the real deal. He's also one of the best players in the NBA. He didn't get on the All-Star team. He should have. Chet Holmgren's unbelievable. I think both of those guys, it's sensational that we have them in the NBA. And I think the thing about Wemby is the stats scream all-timer, right? All the stats you're texting me at 4 a.m. Like, can you believe this shit? All the numbers say this is unprecedented. Also, our eyeballs, are telling us when he against Minnesota last night, this was Tuesday night, and this is weird. I do a thumbs up and the thing comes up with an emoji of a thumbs up. Last night against Minnesota, he does, additionally to the self alley-oop that they had to foul him on because they had no other answer, no other choice there. He did this thing on Kyle Anderson where he's cooking him on the right side, and on TNT they were talking about it. Jamal Crawford was like, "What the hell? This guy, what is this guy? He's 7'5", and he's shaking like hot sauce. Skip to my Lou and one mixtape on the perimeter, and then does a step back 3-pointer that almost touches the ceiling, and before it lands through the hoop, he turns around and runs back on defense." He does the Steph Curry.
Yeah.
Mike, the crossover behind the back, the step back 3, that would have been enough.
Yeah.
But he called his shot Babe Ruth style, and as the ball is descending, he does a 360 like Steph and then runs back. This is not, we can't just like let this go.
No, this is the real reason I think that you invited me on here today, is because people need to understand what's happening. This is like a horror movie. This is like Invasion of the Body Snatchers, where we're the only people who understand what is going on in the world, and we need to alert the rest of the world. We're screaming and waving our arms and saying, pay attention to this. And no one, and I don't blame them, wants to watch Spurs games. I watch an enormous amount of basketball. My son watches an enormous amount of basketball. We're on League Pass every night, flipping around, watching every game we can. But Spurs games, to me, as one of the worst teams in the league, who's worse? Charlotte's worse. Detroit is worse, probably, or they're in the same tier. No one ever wants to stop on a Sacramento San Antonio game late at night,
unless
it has become must watch TV for me. It has become must watch TV in the way that Pedro starts were must watch, in the way that Bonds' at bats were must watch. This is I'm just so happy that we get to witness this guy and what he does. And I will say this too, your mileage may vary, but the casual fandom of just like checking in the next day to watch clips, it does not tell you the story of what he's doing. You have to watch him on defense as he rotates, as he learns how to scheme, as he runs down the court after a miss and is just beating everyone down the court effortlessly, as when he drives and he dribbles once at the 3-point line and then dunks. There are things about the mundanity of a basketball game that become non-mundane when the ball is in his hands. And it is a true joy and a kind of miracle to watch it unfold.
It is. You're so right. There are things in between the lines that he does that it isn't even like the behind the back or the throwing off the backboard for a self alley-oop or like dunking from 20 feet away. It's the little things like, I forget who it was. It might have been in the Lakers game. It was like 5 games ago. He dunked so ferociously that he was like hanging on the rim and his legs were flying around like a carousel around the basket. And one of the guy who like business decision got out of the way, the big man, it wasn't Jokic. I'm trying to remember who it was like, oh, I'm going to take off and run down the floor now because he's like flexing on the rim and like, I'm going to go take advantage of this showboating and I'm going to go. So the guy takes off. Wemby lands within 2 strides is in the other paint. Well past this guy who just took off Forrest Gump style down the floor. Like this guy's showboating, hanging on the rim. I'm going to go catch this Kristaps Porzingis post up, mouse in the house the other way. And he erased it in like 2 steps.
Yeah.
Those things where you're just like,
yeah, you can't believe what you're seeing. There was a play, I think this was when he was still in France. I don't remember now because it all blurs together. But there was a play where, or it might have been preseason. There was a pick and roll that he was not involved in at the top of the key, basically. He was not involved in it. He was on the wing. And the ball handler came around the pick and started to drive. Wemby reached over from the wing, like Mr. Fantastic style, and poked the ball away. Didn't steal it, but just poked it away so that the guy couldn't roll to the hoop. The pick and roll fell apart because the ball handler had to collect the ball.
I remember this.
And the guy who had set the pick, reset. Then I believe it was the same play. The action continued. The guy came around another pick and roll on the other side. Wemby was on the weak side and came over, like took 1 step backwards and reached all the way across the hoop and blocked the ball from the weak side. Like he's able to defend. It's like how the main defensive question on a pick and roll for the defender who's retreating is, do you go after the ball handler or do you defend the guy who's rolling?
It's right? It's an or.
It's an or. And if you if you go after the ball handler, the pass goes up and it's a dunk. If you fall back, if it's Trae Young, it's a little 8-foot floater and the ball, usually most guys can hit that shot. It is not an or anymore. It is an and. He does both things. He pressures the ball handler and he is so tall and so long that if they try to float the ball up for an alley-oop, he just gets up and blocks it away or just grabs it out of the air. You are playing basketball against a velociraptor, and there's no offensive game plan for how to attack a velociraptor.
Okay, you are in the business of storytelling, and you are in the business of captivating audiences. I think the reason why Wemby-Mania hasn't taken over the NBA, and they're not putting them on every NBA national TV game, is one, because the Spurs are not very good. And it's hard to tell that story when you're watching just not very good basketball players on the floor.
Mushy games, yeah.
That's one thing that distracts the viewing experience. But the first game that he was on national television, I texted all my casual NBA buddies and like my brothers, and I was like, stop what you're doing tonight and watch Wemby tonight. And it was against Dallas. It was like the season opener. And he just let out a huge fart. on national TV.
That's right. He didn't score for like the whole first quarter or something, right? Or he had 2 points or something.
I'm convinced that like 50% of the apathy, or at least the like, I don't really believe this guy, is because of that first impression. That his
I think you're right.
big magnum, his opening act in front of America was a dud. He had 15 points, 5 turnovers, and it was a disaster, like you said. I think that's a big part of it. And I also wonder the fact that he's French and not an American-born player that we were able to watch grow up before our eyes. How much of that is the reason why he just isn't the number one story in sports right now?
That's some of it. I mean, America learns about lottery picks in March Madness for the most part, right? You learn who these guys are because everyone's going to learn who Edey is because Purdue's going to make a run. Everyone's going to learn who Caravan is because UConn's going to make a run.
Kemba Walker, you know who Kemba Walker is because
right. And Danny Manning going back forever, right? Like, so the fact that he didn't have that introduction to people, I think is something of a big deal. I think the opening act, that national game, was a big deal. Do you remember Zion's first game where the hype was unreal and he was laying an egg for a while? He wasn't really doing anything. He got fouled a couple times. There were people. The audience was ready to explode.
Yes,
and the crowd was like revved up, and he kind of wasn't doing anything. And then in a span of like 2.5 minutes, he hit like 4 threes. Like he had been driving to the hoop and missing layups and getting fouled, and it was kind of like it was trying to launch. And then he hit a 3, and then he came back down and he hit another 3, and then he hit another 3, and the crowd went bananas. And Wemby hasn't had that signature moment on that size stage. And until he does, I think you may be right. Like we're going to be in this invasion of the body snatchers zone where you and I and other people are screaming and yelling and saying, pay attention to what this guy's doing, but he won't have captured the heart of the country.
What does he need to do? Like, is it as simple as he needs a Luka on his team?
I think next year, I mean, they're going to have another lottery pick, and my guess is they will take a point guard. I don't know who, but I think they'll probably take a point guard, or they'll trade for one. Yeah. Or I think really what he needs, and it's too bad that like this will never happen, but what he needs is Chris Paul to like win a title this year with the Warriors and then say, okay, my career is done. And now what's left for me? And have a conversation. We're going to get
like Shaq Cavs with LeBron where it's like, yeah, he's Shaq, but like not peak Shaq.
It doesn't matter.
I love CP, but
you just need, what he needs is an experienced point guard to point. He needs someone to take the ball up the court and start pointing. You know, when point guards, Jimmy Butler did this the other night against your Portland Trailblazers. There was the Blazers were closing the gap, and I was watching it with this sense of doom and sadness because I knew that the Blazers weren't going to win the game. And Butler brought the ball up, and he was on the left side, and he just started pointing. He pointed, and someone came up to throw a screen, and he waved him off and was like, no, not you, that guy. And he came up, and then Butler switched on to whoever he was switched on to, who was like 6'2". And I was just like, that's when that, I didn't think this at the time, but I'm thinking it now. That is what Wemby needs. He needs a guy running his offense who's like, you stand there, you move over there, do this, go over there. I'm going to go like this. You roll to the hoop. I will throw you an alley-oop. It'll be 2 points. Until he has that, he is never, right now, again, 20.7, 10.1, 3.4 blocks. If he had Jimmy Butler or Draymond or Trae Young or Halliburton or really Drew Holiday or Derek White or Jalen Brunson or Quentin Grimes or Josh Hart, if he had any of these guys on his team who could just say like, okay, here's what's going to happen now. I'm going to organize this and I'm going to move the pieces around the chessboard. He can increase those numbers by 50%. I don't think it's impossible that he could be, that next year with the right guy, he could be at 30, 15, 5, 2 steals, hitting 3 threes a game. Like there's the problem, like you said, is not the limits of his ability. It is the limits of his team to put him in the right situations to exercise his abilities.
I keep going back to this point. Maybe I'm just overdoing it. It's just so much of basketball is who you're playing with and where are you being positioned on the floor. And for the first half of the season, it seemed like a crime what was happening. And we're giving Pop a free pass because he's Pop, and the Spurs a free pass because it's the Spurs, right? The Spurs way. Tim Duncan, Manu Ginobili, Tony Park, you going down the line, it's like, yeah, they get the benefit of the doubt here. But if this was happening in Charlotte or Detroit or any other team, Washington, there are riots in the streets.
Yeah.
To what they're doing to Wemby. And I feel like that's part of the conversation too that is missing is we're kind of giving Pop and them a free pass because like, hey, they've earned it, right? It's Pop. He's got a master plan here. But man, this whole incentive structure in the league, like I don't blame Pop for basically tanking this season and going for the Jeremy Sochan experiment, not going after a guy like Austin Reeves, and he has his warts, but like the fact that the San Antonio Spurs decided to pass when they had the cap space and the ability to go after these guys this offseason, when they had Victor Wembanyama coming in, that to me is an indictment on the incentive structure that the only way you're going to get a star player of his caliber, like all-star player, locked in on a San Antonio market is by playing the draft.
Yeah.
Is by being bad for a couple years and then hoping that you become the Thunder, that you get Shai Gilgeous-Alexander in a trade, and then Chet Holmgren and J-Dub, and they just essentially take over the league. That's the incentive structure. In baseball, I don't know. Like we have Mike Trout, who's the next Ted Williams out there, and I guess he kind of languishes in obscurity because he's only one guy on a 50, 40 person roster, right? Shohei Ohtani, same thing. I feel like Ohtani's the same thing with you where it's like he's doing things, he's not doing he's right? The same way. He's We have a league of ands, right? We have got Ohtani and we've got Victor Wembanyama. There's no choices anymore. They can do both. Hey, you're going to be a Cy Young and throw 98 and have unhittable pitches. And you're also going to be the best hitter in baseball. We have two guys. And what are the differences as a baseball fan, that you are? The Ohtani experience and the Wemby experience. What is the viewing experience? How is it similar and how is it different?
It's different because Ohtani was able to break through despite the team that he played on. And the skill sets of pitching and hitting are so rare and so outrageous and he's so captivating as an athlete that he was actually able to kind of transcend the muddy, stupid, lame team he played for and become known to a national audience. Wemby has not yet. And I think, again, the experience of watching a Spurs basketball game is notably worse than the experience of watching an Angels game in the last few years.
Which is weird because Ohtani's not on the screen very much. Whereas Wemby,
it doesn't matter though, because you know that there are going to be 4 or 5 distinct moments when your attention needs to focus, and the rest of the time you kind of tune it out. When Ohtani comes up, the place is electric and you're focused. Or when he's pitching, you're completely focused. So it's not it's a good analogy. I think actually the better analogy is Mike Trout. Because Mike Trout is not an really, except for the fact that in his early days, not so much anymore, but his early days, he was maybe the best defensive center fielder in the game. So he was making insane catches and robbing home runs and also hitting like Ted Williams. But Mike Trout has played in one playoff game one playoff series in his entire life. He was 1 for 12 in that playoff series, and that's it. And so he's also never had so far the kind of like welcome to prime time deal. He's played on mediocre teams, mostly below 500 teams for a decade. And the nightmare scenario is that the Spurs never kick it into gear. It's trust the process, but there's no process. And they have no ability to sign big time free agents. They never go out and get even an Austin Reeves or a past his prime Trae Young or anyone. The dream, if we want to be optimists, is that they draft well again. They start to the team wins, 35 games next year instead of the 15 they're going to win this year. and they have 2 max cap space slots, and they find 2 guys, and either Pop or whoever replaces him is able to say, look at this tool we have. Look, imagine, hey, Tyrese Halliburton or the equivalent, imagine how many assists you will have if you play with this guy. Imagine how easy it will be for you to shoot
score
from the perimeter when you have this guy. Imagine how fun it will be to win with this guy. And that, I think, is, look, again, this is year 1. He has played 50-something games, and that's it. There's a long road ahead of him, but no lottery pick, I think, still has ever turned down their rookie contract extension, right? The max extension. I think no one's ever done it.
Yep.
So he's in San Antonio for 7 years or 6 years or whatever it is, minimum. And so we just have to hope that ownership and Pop or whoever replaces him is smart about this and says, like, look, this is a once in a lifetime opportunity. We have got a nuclear weapon that we can deploy. We just need the right infrastructure to arm it and set it off. And if that happens,
very fraught analogy here. We need someone to press that button who's crazy enough to press it.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I've gone so far down this rabbit hole. I have gone to Sport Track and have just like looked at like point guards of like whose contracts are coming up in the next couple of years. Like who could even move there? I think it's going to end up being a trade.
Yeah. I'm looking at Trae, man.
I think it's a trade, and I think it's the first big move is a trade. They have to hope that they draft really well and they get lucky again, and they have a guy, not necessarily in the Chet Holmgren model, but in the even in the Keegan Murray. Like if put Keegan Murray on that team, and I know he's more of a catch and shoot guy, but
they had Doug McDermott, and they're like, yeah, we're sending him to Indiana. The one guy who could actually Vassell is great, but one sharpshooter that could space the floor for Wemby and also has great impact numbers.
Yeah.
Gone.
Yeah. Malik Monk. There's 8 guys on the Kings that if you drop them on to the Spurs roster right now, they would start. Wemby would his numbers would go up 25%. He would be at 25, 26 points a game. He'd be hitting 2.5 threes a game. I mean, I really hope
that's the difference between him being kind of an indie favorite or cult favorite and being box office MVP every night. If the difference is a Trae Young and a Keegan Murray, then that's an indictment on the Spurs. If the difference between him being the greatest player of all time, where everyone's saying this is going to be the GOAT. And I firmly believe it's not just the stats in our heads, our brains and the spreadsheets that are saying this. It's not just our eyeballs. It's also our ears. When we hear greats talk about what it's like to take the floor, when Joel Embiid takes the floor and you see it on national TV, him go, and go damn, walking away. All of this screams, this is going to be the greatest player of all time. And I will say here, barring injury, I think he will go down as the GOAT.
Really?
Nothing I've seen is dissuading me. The frame, the full package of what he says and what he's all about. It's not like he's got this tool bag, this toolkit, and then he goes off and he's saying all the wrong things to the media, and he's chasing a life that we don't want. He's the full package. And I think the biggest reason why people aren't on board with the idea that he could contend with LeBron and Michael is because the Spurs suck. Because he's playing with borderline NBA players, and I'm serious.
No, he's playing with essentially replacement level team. He is playing with a random assortment of guys who you could replace right now with the second best guy on every team in the Big Ten. It's really wild. And when you think about the fact that he is 6 inches taller than Kevin Durant, 6.5 inches taller than Kevin Durant. That's how much taller I am than my 16-year-old son. And it is not hard for me to beat my 16-year-old son at basketball, even though my 16-year-old son plays basketball every day. I'm just much taller than he is, and I can body him, and I can block all of his shots. And he can do that to Kevin Durant. He can do that to guys that no one can do that to except Jason Tatum, who I'll remind you blocked a Durant fadeaway in the playoffs.
Yeah, by the way. There's also this stat that the Spurs are plus 150 with Devin Vassell and Trae Jones this. I'm going to actually pull this up because I think people need to know there is a winning team here. Yeah. Pop has not played those lineups. There's been some injuries and there's been some experiments, but there is a good team here. They're 11-48, not because of
there's not a good team. There's a better team than what we've seen, but there's not a good team. And also, look, I'm giving Pop a pass, as we all are, on the whole season, because he knew the team wasn't going anywhere. He needed to understand what he has in all of these guys. So he tried a bunch of crazy stuff. He had Jeremy Sochan as a point guard. That's not his position. He's mixed and matched lineups. I saw another stat about how many different combinations of players the team has used this year. It's absurd. So I'm going to say that this is his laboratory. This year was his laboratory. He is experimenting and sort of throwing spaghetti at the wall to see if it sticks. The question is next year to me, because they're going to have a top, whatever it is, pick. They're going to have a lottery pick. They have enormous amounts of cap room. They can make trades. They can trade. They have so many number one draft choices that are just sitting there waiting to be converted into competent NBA players. If this happens again next year,
then
Pop needs to think about maybe heading to the TNT studio show.
Yeah. Or to a wine cellar somewhere and never be seen from again. Like that's right. Fine. Like some
just
sort of vineyard.
Buy a estate in Sonoma and sip wine and just enjoy your life.
So, you kind of, when I said that he's the GOAT barring injury, you were like, really? What is it holding you back? Because you are the biggest Wemby fan, or at least the biggest campaigner in my group chats.
Yeah,
or Wemby, but you kind of are like, wait, I don't know about GOAT.
Well, start with the obvious. He's 19. He's played 50 games. It's hard to get. This is a small sample size. His body does not suggest longevity necessarily. The guy who's closest to him in terms of his skill set, to me, is Durant, and Durant is 6 inches shorter. And Durant has had Achilles problems and knee problems and all sorts of problems in his life. Porzingis is another comp. Porzingis, same thing. A lot of injuries, a lot of knee stress.
Barring injury.
I know you did.
If he is healthy, the package, the skill set, the size, and what we're seeing with the handles and he's doing Steph Curry turnarounds. I get it. When he's 20 years old, he just turned 20 like a month ago. Okay.
I think when you're talking about the GOAT, so Poznansky and I have had this conversation a million times, but I'll have it with you. I am a LeBron truther in the sense that I think that LeBron is not only better than Michael Jordan in terms of his basketball career, I think it's not particularly close. And I think that if you took LeBron in his prime and Jordan in his prime and you had them play one-on-one and LeBron had the ball first, Jordan wouldn't get the ball. LeBron would win 10-0. And the reasons for that are not complicated. He's a better 3-point shooter by far than Jordan was. He is much taller than Jordan. He outweighs Jordan by somewhere between 50 and 70 pounds, depending on what year we're talking about.
He's Karl Malone. People don't realize he's Karl Malone.
Yes. He is a better, and this wouldn't matter in one-on-one, but he's a much better passer than Michael Jordan ever was.
I like the idea of him faking a pass and Jordan.
And I don't know how a 6'8", 260 or 255 guy loses in one-on-one to a 6'6", 185 guy in one-on-one. I don't see how that would happen when you can shoot as well as LeBron. And when you have the package of shots that LeBron has, which include a lot of the stuff that Jordan had, both in terms of him driving and fading away and post moves and everything else. So I've always been like, I don't understand what anyone's arguing about here. To me, it's incredibly obvious who the greatest of all time is. And when you're saying that Wemby is going to be better than LeBron, barring injury, you're talking about him not only doing what he has been doing already and what he's shown he can do, but also developing parts of his game he does not have yet. And those parts of his game, I think, would come obviously with a better team, with better teammates around him. But now you're adding passing to that mix. You are adding not turning the ball over.
Some of his passes this year are insane.
I agree. But he's to get to where LeBron is as a passer, as an offensive orchestrator, that's a very long road for him. So when you're talking about the GOAT, you're talking about not just, wow, no one's ever done this package of stuff better. It's no one's ever done everything better. And that's where I think, talk to me in 3 or 4 years. And if he's still injury free, and we'll see, like, does he have the glimmers of being able to match LeBron in all of the things that LeBron has done?
Is there anything funny about Wemby?
Everything is funny about Wemby. First of all, he's got a very good sense of humor, and you know that because he came on Halloween dressed as Slender Man. That was an amazing move. That was an incredible move.
See, and you're still holding the GOAT away from him, and he's a funny guy. You're saying he is just comedy gold, and yet you're still holding back on the GOAT.
I mean, there's an episode of The Simpsons called 33 Short Films About Springfield. You know that episode? It's like a lot of little tiny stories. Yeah. And one of the stories was based on a writer named Ian Maxstone Graham, who's very tall and who drove a very small car. And there's a guy in the episode who comes out of the car. Everyone's laughing at him because he's a very tall guy in a small car. And he gets out of the car. And when he comes out of the car, if you watch it, he like folds out of the car. It's hard to explain, but he steps out of the car, and it's like his body that when he gets out of the car is like twice the size of a person who could actually fit in the car. That's what Wemby looks like all the time to me. Yep. It's like when he sits in a chair, or when in that viral clip of when he stepped over the row of chairs to greet those people in France, it was like, how does this human form actually move about the earth? It's incredibly funny to me.
There was a block last night against Monte Morris, who everyone was like, "Oh, he makes it look like child's play." He's the child. Wemby is the child. He just turned 20, and he's true. Like, okay, here's the height: 6'2", Monte Morris. He's 6'2".
I've been dying. I don't know why.
He's the tallest guy in every person's office, right?
Yeah.
Every workplace. How tall are you? It's probably 6'2", somewhere in there.
I'm 6 feet even.
Okay.
I've been dying
with your hair.
All year.
I can't compete with the hair.
With my hair, it's 6'7".
I've been with NBA players. With shoes, he's 7'5", but without shoes, he's 7'4". With Mike Scher's hair, he's 6'2".
I don't know how it will happen, but somehow I want Wemby to switch on to Jose Alvarado. I don't know why him particularly, but he's such it's like, that's what I don't know if I actually saw the last time they played, but if they play again, I'm going to watch the whole game and just wait for him to somehow switch on to Jose Alvarado. I don't know why I've singled out Alvarado. There's shorter guys in the league than Alvarado, but I really want to see that.
Because you saw him like get in a fight with Thomas Bryant. He jumped up like a little child, like to try to like get out. Yeah, I got you.
Yeah, well, he's like a little water bug, you know, and he's. I love watching that guy play. But there's something that would be very funny to me about it. It would be like, it's like when you see a giraffe in slow motion slowly walking through the Serengeti, and then you see like a hummingbird or something like sort of fly around its neck and like float, and the giraffe doesn't even notice it because the giraffe is just like lumbering through the plains. I don't know. I'm happy that you gave me this opportunity to just rant about this guy because I just want I hate the Mike Ryan Ruizes of the world who are poo-pooing him and trying to downplay his accomplishments, because it's remarkable. It's all remarkable.
Ever since Mike Ryan like cited his 3-point percentage or whatever, I think Wemby is like shooting 43% from downtown. So keep talking, Mike.
Keep talking, haters.
Keep talking, haters. This guy he's Thanos. He's just he's adding stones to his repertoire every time you hate him. He's incredible. So thank you for doing this.
Before we go, one last thing is so last January, I went on Bill Simmons' podcast and I told the world, I was also waving my arms and warning people about the Miami Heat, who were at the time a 500 team. And everyone said I was crazy, and everyone said I was ridiculous and fear-mongering. And I was like, I'm telling you, the Miami Heat are the most dangerous team in the East, or the team I fear the most. And they're gonna. I even laid out the scenario by which they like knocked off the Bucks and then beat the Knicks or somebody, and then beat the Celtics.
You got the script.
In the finals.
You got the script.
Yeah. Yes, for the first 40 or so, 45 games of this season, still terrified of them, still hate them, still live in a daily fear of what they will do to me and my team. But I felt like they were not the same team as they were last year. There were some key differences. They were not winning the turnover battle as often as they did in the years past. They were a little sloppier. Lowry was absolute garbage. When he played, the team was terrible. They also were not getting to the line nearly as much, and that was like a huge part of their success. And I was like, okay, I'm not going to say anything about this because I don't want to jinx it, but I don't think this is the same team. In the last 10 games, they were like, oh, okay, it's time to flip the switch, and now they're the same team. And they are, whatever they are, the 6th seed currently, they're like a game ahead of the Magic, and no one's paying attention to them. It is time to once again sound the klaxon, sound the clarion call. The East needs to rally to this cause, and they need to start paying attention to the Heat, and they need to beat the Heat, because if the Heat get into the playoffs again, I see no reason why they aren't sweeping at least to the Eastern Conference Finals and not to the finals. Tell me I'm wrong.
You're not wrong. And I remember when they went through that 7-game slide, I was like, I don't care. Don't care. And there people were sounding the alarms like, oh, it's over. They can't do it. Jimmy's done. Bam's done. Like fraud. They had their chance last year and they blew it. The Celtics are going to run all over them. And like you said, this feels like Undertaker sitting up in the coffin ringside.
It's so scary. They're the scariest team in the world to me.
So, all right, you're playing both sides here, though, right? Because you think they're frauds because they play zone and because they have like this not shady side to them, but like it's cheap what they do. But you also are terrified. So which one is it that you think they're frauds or that they're?
Make no mistake. I do not think they are frauds. I think two things. I can't believe that they get away with playing as much zone as they do, because zone is a thing that you learn how to defeat in AAU, and you learn how to defeat again in college, because most college teams play zone. And somehow when they play it in the NBA, when the Heat decide to play it in the NBA, the other teams just like fritz out. They just are like, wait, what do you do again? Someone has to flash to the post and I've got to do this. They just forget everything and they keep trying to play the same way, and they play right into the Heat's hands, and it drives me up the wall. And I watch teams like Oklahoma State Oklahoma
I was going to say, you're watching the Cowboys. That's amazing. Like that you love basketball that much. Mike Schur is up at night watching Oklahoma State Cowboys.
I get
basketball.
very upset when I talk about the Heat. Give me a break. I watch Oklahoma City or a great shooting team face that dumb zone and just insist upon doing the same thing that they always do. It happened to Sacramento the other night. Sacramento absolutely tore apart the Lakers, or the Clippers. Sorry, the Clippers, a much better team than the Heat. They tore them apart and they absolutely destroyed them. And then they faced the Heat again on the second night of a back-to-back, but they faced the Heat, and the Heat are doing what they do, and the Kings just don't adjust. It's still Sabonis trying to run the dribble handoff to someone to shoot a three-pointer, and when he does it, there's like 4 Heat defenders waiting to defend that play. And then the ball handler, whoever it was, Malik Monk or Sabonis or whoever, or De'Aaron Fox, they are like, okay, wait, I got to retreat. And they retreat to reset. And when they do, what does the Heat defender do? He chases him all the way back to the half-court line. And then suddenly De'Aaron Fox is at the half-court line, and there's 8 seconds left on the shot clock. And he looks around, and everyone seems covered. And they panic and they run and they take a weird running 18-foot fall away jumper. And I scream at my TV because I'm like, Did no one on the Kings staff prepare you to play the Heat? Did you not know? Did you think tonight was going to be the one night they didn't run a zone against you? I just don't understand how teams aren't prepared for what they do. And so they're not frauds at all. And the other thing that they do, like I just said, is every guy on that team gives a max effort performance every night. And so you look at the roster and it's like, who are they playing? It's like Cole Swider and Caleb Martin and Duncan Robinson. And you're thinking in your head, and Jovic. And you're thinking to yourself, well, no problem. We've got De'Aaron Fox and we've got Sabonis and we've got Malik Monk and we've got Keegan Murray and we've got whoever. We're going to destroy them. But those guys are playing at like 80% because it's a regular season game in February. And Caleb Martin and Cole Swider are playing at 110% because that's how they've been coached, and that is where they win. That is their arbitrageable thing, that is effort. And I hate if you say, I'm not even going to say the term, the HC. Let's just give the initials HC. Don't say it out loud, or I swear to God,
I already did it. Yep.
I'll close my computer and this will be over. But as much as I hate it, I cannot deny that somehow or another, when guys join that team, they're drafted to that team, they're selected by the front office, they're traded to that team. DeLon Wright shows up and he plays harder than he has ever played in his life since he was trying to make his 6th grade team. And that is why, to me, they are dangerous. It is not their personnel necessarily. It is not anything special that they do. It's that they confuse you with that zone. Teams are not prepared for it. And every single pass is contested. There is a hand flying into every lane. When the ball is swung to the corner and the nearest defender is 20 feet away, that defender sprints as hard as he can and jumps as high as he can, because if his hand gets 1 inch higher in the air, it might change the trajectory of the ball from the shooter by 1 millimeter, which might be the difference between a made corner three and a missed corner three. And when everyone on your team, 10 deep, plays that way in every single game, you end up going to the finals. And that is what scares me.
Heat culture. You hate it because it's true. You hate it because it's true. You're like, I can't deny it anymore. Like, this is there's something here. Whether you lean in by putting it on your jersey or not, like, that was kind of corny. But the idea is, we can put it on our jersey and we'll still murder you guys on the way to the finals.
Yeah.
Doesn't matter. You can laugh all you want at how corny and tacky it is to put your theme song or your motto on the jersey. Guess what? Can't do shit about it. Can't do it. Can't do anything.
Well, you know what really chafes my hide is Jimmy Butler is 2 things.
Here we go.
He is an excellent basketball player and he's an asshole.
Yeah.
And somehow he landed in the place where being an asshole is an asset, where it's what they actually want, where it fits, where it works, where everyone respects it, where he barks at his coach and his players, and he makes it's Kevin Garnett on the 08 Celtics, right? It's like what the team needed, what the organization needed was an alpha player, an all-star caliber player who was also an asshole. And everywhere else that guy is gone, the Timberwolves and the Bulls and every other place and the Sixers, they all were like, this guy's too big of an asshole. We can't deal with him. And he shows up at the Heat, and what do they say? Thank God we finally have an asshole to run the team. And it's infuriating because, and I'm like, I was saying earlier, I go to Sport Track all the time to look at contracts and stuff. I look at Jimmy. I'm like, when is it over? When is he leaving? I used to
When's his expiration date?
When is he? How old is he? I'm counting the days. Until he hits like an age where he's too old to play, or whether he ages out of this contract. I mean, he's getting paid a whole lot of money next year, and he has a whole lot of Tibbs miles on those knees.
Oh,
and at some point, I keep
this sounds
saying
like
myself,
coping. This is coping.
It's 100% coping. I'm not even trying to hide it. I just can't believe that the right guy found the right team, and it happens to be the team I hate the most in the world.
Do you remember when he tried to fight his head coach in the sidelines?
In a game.
In the middle of a game, they went toe-to-toe, ready to... What other workplace does that happen where afterwards, both of you have the best, like, next 2 months of your career? Like, that was...
Yeah.
After that happened, I remember tweeting out, they're going to go to the finals, or they're going to... This is turning around the season. And people are like, yo, did you just watch? This is an absolute disaster. It is very clear that this is over. Jimmy and Spo, they're done. They hate each other's guts, and it's over. Teams do not survive this.
Right.
And what did they do? Next 2 years, they're the best team in the East.
Yep.
After that moment.
I hate them so much. I hate them so much, Tom.
You're shaking.
Make them go away.
Mike Schur, do you have anything you want to plug before we go? Hey, thank you for helping raise money for ALS research and the Project Main Street that Bushambi does. An amazing foundation that helps people with ALS and families with grants to help them manage the horror show that is ALS. So thank you for including me on that, and thank you for all the work you've done.
It was great to have you. At last count, I think we're up over $60,000 for Project Main Street. People can go to projectmainst.org and donate. Joe and I are doing a podcast soon where we announce the winners of the raffle items.
Wait, you're not doing this justice. They're raising $60,000 because what activity are we doing on the on an audio podcast?
We're opening old baseball cards and basketball cards and talking about them. That's it. That's all we did. We raised over $60,000. It was a delight. It was really fun to have you. And we had Bushambi on because it's his charity he started. And we found some good cards. We found some excellent cards that people can win. The raffle is over. So sadly, with the raffle, the expiration date is hit, but we'll be announcing the winners shortly. If you go to the podcast over on Meadowlark Media. And thanks to everyone who donated. It was very fun. We plan to do it every year. So maybe next year you can tune in and try to help folks with ALS and also, and the families of folks with ALS, and also, listen to us laugh when we open a 1987 Topps Jamie Easterly.
The fact that when we pulled a Ken Griffey rookie card, we were like, oh my God, this is never going to happen again. And then 3 minutes later, Joe pulls out two more. Just like, what is going on here? It was so much fun. So thank you, dude. Appreciate you. And I can't wait to have you on when the Celtics and Heat take head to head in the second round.
I said this to Lebitard last year, and I wasn't kidding. If the Celtics play the Heat in the playoffs, I will not be watching the games. I can't do it. Yeah, I can't watch the games. It's too stressful. It gives me heart palpitations. In the game 7 when the Celtics won, I
didn't mean to wind you up again. I'm sorry.
It's okay. In the game 7, the year the Celtics won, I was like, I'm not watching it. I'm gonna wait, and I'm gonna just have dinner with my wife, and we were with some friends. And at a time when I knew the game was over, I went to the bathroom and I checked the score, and the Celtics had won by 2 because Jimmy front rimmed that 3. And I saw that they won. And I had 2 thoughts. Number one, I'm so relieved that they won. And also, thank God I did not watch that game because I think I would be dead. So if the Celtics play the Heat, I will not. My son will watch the games because he's a well-adjusted human being. I will not be watching the games.
Instead, as Mays suggests, just watch Wemby highlights.
There you go. Great idea.
That'll probably serve your soul a little bit better than watching
2.5 hours of just the most insane alien maneuvers you've ever seen.